I think they're going to do it the same that they did last week. I think you have your best corner on the best wide receiver. And I think they're going to do that for the pure fact is it really worked in week 2. Now, if that doesn't work throughout the game,
it's your home for real Eagles football talk, man. We're not talking silly with it. What the dilly with it? Let's bring on Kayla Santiago, our next guest here with us today, checking in from Delmarva Sports, of course, Philadelphia's finest. Good morning, Kayla. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Well, I know you're riding high off of the Eagles' victory. Where were you for Monday Night Football? I know you're down there in the D.C. area. Were you amongst your Eagles brethren? Did you take this game in solo? What was the Monday Night Football affair like for Kayla Santiago?
Unfortunately, I had to work, and that's our busiest time when we're getting ready for a 10:30 sports show, and we're really dialed in at 8 o'clock. But we had a whole projector going on in the office. We were cued in right there. A lot of my friends were taking bets as well, trying to see what Justin Jefferson was going to do. And I was just screaming my head off when I could because I was shocked at how good they played and what a complete game they played. And it was just awesome to be around everybody that's not Eagles fans and to be able to brag it in their face just a little bit.
Well, you mentioned the dreadful JJ word, Justin Jefferson, and it gets Eagles fans a little bit queasy, but not so much after this performance. Darius Slay took him right out of the game, maybe made us forget about the draft day blunder just for at least one night. But, I mean, listen, Slay's been doing this a long time. He's one of the best in the business. But I think he surprised everybody a little bit with just how much we talked about all week. Hey, you can't stop Justin Jefferson. You could only hope to contain him. I mean, this was a straight up lockdown affair.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Darius Slay, right, and you see what he's been able to do over the years with other teams. But for him to be with Philadelphia and to be able to do everything that he has talked about from those previous teams and on paper against Justin Jefferson, I mean, are you kidding me? When I was watching this performance by Darius Slay, he intercepted it almost 3 times. And that second pick that he was trying to get, he was shaken up a little bit and then comes right back on the next play and gets the INT. So he was laser focused in that game. You can tell he just enjoys playing ball. He's putting it all out there. He's a well-deserved captain for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. 6 receptions for Justin Jefferson, no touchdowns. I mean, I don't see anybody right now that's able to defend him that well in the league. And Darius Slay did a phenomenal job on primetime.
He was named NFC Defensive Player of the Week for a reason, that Darius Slay, and he deserves it, no doubt about it. He draws another tough assignment this week in Terry McLaurin. We've been talking about the Eagles cornerbacks matchup where, you know, Curtis Samuel is a twitchy guy. Jahan Dotson's in the slot. Maybe Bradbury and Slay flip-flop because Bradbury's kind of the lankier guy. He might have trouble with the Curtis Samuel. Could you see maybe a Bradbury on McLaurin and Slay switching over to Curtis Samuel? Or how do you think the Eagles kind of attack this matchup here?
I think they're going to do it the same that they did last week. I think you have your best corner on the best wide receiver. And I think they're going to do that for the pure fact is it really worked in week 2. Now, if that doesn't work throughout the game, I can definitely see them switching, especially just because I think the Eagles offense can really run it up in this game. And I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue when you talk about how close the matchup will be. So I wouldn't be surprised if second half of Gannon's like, all right, guys, let's switch it up a little bit. The height difference for Slay is just not there. He's getting burned a little bit. Let's try to switch things around for second half play. Eagles already probably have a decent lead at that point. Maybe they'll try it, but with how things worked against the Vikings, I think they're going to go best receiver, best corner.
Well, I will say Jonathan Gannon pushed all the right buttons in this game. We were pretty harsh on him after week 1, but we got to, you know, give credit where credit is due and kudos to adjusting because I thought he did adapt and adjust accordingly. We saw the blitz percentage went from 15% up to 33%. I think they had 16 quarterback pressures, a lot of them coming on the Kirk Cousins interceptions. Do you anticipate more of the same against our good friend Carson Wentz? Shall we continue to apply the pressure and get Carson a little nervous back there?
I think you have to because From seeing him with the Philadelphia Eagles and watching tape on Carson Wentz, you know he likes to scramble in the pocket. So as soon as you're able to bring in that pressure, if he has nowhere to go, it's sack on sack on sack, or putting a lot of pressure on him where he's not able to make good throws. I think this is the perfect quarterback to do that to this week. And talking about John Gannon real quick as well, I mean, he either heard the Philadelphia media, the Philadelphia fans, or really just sat down and watched a full-length week of tape, looked at it and said, wow, I need to come up with a completely different game plan for Monday Night Football, because the improvements that we saw all around defensively in that game were just spectacular. I'm not saying he's my favorite person ever right now, but I'm very impressed with how he was able to adjust. And I think it's a good sign for Philadelphia that they're able to improve that much in week 2. But yeah, you have to bring the blitz. I think it's the same game plan that you had against the Vikings. Carson likes to scramble a lot in the pocket. You can really catch him making bad passes if you put the pressure on him all night long.
No, I would tend to agree with that. And, you know, I will say that the coaches will never admit they read the press clippings, but Jonathan Gannon was definitely in tune, I think, with what was being said, because you even saw it during his presser leading up to the Vikings game when he was kind of on the hot seat. He was very calculated. He kind of took a moment to digest the question before he responded, because he knew any little thing I say in the Philadelphia media market can and will be used against me, right? We're going to twist it. We're going to turn it. But kudos to Gannon for at least being self-aware. And whether it was, you know, the media or doing a self-reflection in the mirror, or him huddling up with Coach Sirianni, and maybe Howie Roseman was involved with the game plan, we don't know. But I do think Gannon adjusted. And that's really all you can ask for at this stage of the game, right? Is adapt, adjust. But now we've got to keep the pressure on, keep doing what we did. And that, to me, will be really a determining X factor in terms of how far this team goes.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think each week you're going to have to see where can you improve on all assets of the ball. This week, the passing game for Jalen Hurts improved. He did exactly what he needed to do every single play. He was phenomenal on Monday Night Football. On the other side of the ball, the defense taking a step up. Now, you're going to go through the season. It's a long season. There's probably going to be injuries, but you have to adjust each and every game. I'm not saying he's going to have a perfect defensive scheme every game. There's going to be some weeks where Eagles fans will probably go back to that, I don't want John Gannon, fire John Gannon, because everybody knows how Eagles fans are. They're very impatient sometimes and not giving him room to grow in that week. But you look at the adjustments, you look at the accountability, and I think that's the biggest thing. He doesn't have this ego where he's like, no, we're going to do it my way no matter what, even when it's the wrong way. He adjusted, he brought the blitz. And at the end of the day, I mean, that defense helped them win the game in Monday Night Football against a phenomenal running back and a phenomenal wide receiver.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention about them taking Dalvin Cook out of the game. And listen, whether you're a coach or a player, I mean, that's what you sign up for when you ink the dotted line to play on for Philadelphia. It comes with part of the territory. There's a lot of pressure here. It's a big-time media market. There's a lot of beat reporters before and after the game. And Hassan Reddick can tell you all about it, right? The Camden native. He said, hey, I expect that from the Eagles fan base. He said, if I didn't hear it, then I think something was wrong. So Reddick gets it. He's from here. He had a little bit of what I would call somewhat of a bounce back week. Only played 67% of the snaps, was back in coverage a little bit. Still, you know, I'd still like to see him getting after the quarterback a little bit more. What was your takeaways in terms of how they implemented Hassan Reddick in week 2?
I think that they're going to have to implement it more in this game. I think this game can really show if he can get to the QB, especially it being Carson Wentz. And this is not talking down on him at all, but you know the quarterback that you're going up against in week 3 here. You know for a fact that he likes to scramble a lot. You know that he likes to make those premature throws a lot once he's under pressure. He can get out of the pocket a lot when he's in trouble, but this is a perfect opportunity for him to show the pressure that he can put on the QB. And I think this week he's really going to have to show that a little bit more. Once again, though, this is a week-by-week circumstance right now. I think you're going to see him get better, but I think when he's going up against tough offensive lines, when he's going up against really good quarterbacks, say Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, even an Aaron Rodgers that the Eagles play a little bit into the year, I think it's going to be tough. I think you're going to see some weeks where you really want him to be better, but I think he can take a step up this week for sure.
I picked your brain on the defense pretty good there, Kayla. Let's shift gears over to the offensive side. The one, the only, Mr. Jalen Hurts. I call him big time money because that's the way he's trending. And I think we're witnessing, I keep saying, the maturation of Jalen Hurts. And finally, some of the media are starting to come around and buy in, but not all of the media. We still have some doubters out there. Where are you on the Jalen Hurts thermometer gauge?
Surprised, and in a good way, though, because you're talking about a guy who really is in their second full year as a starter. There is so much pressure on him. There are so many expectations that you don't really see, especially considering he wasn't drafted to be a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson. There's so many expectations on Jalen Hurts. But instead of falling to that, Hurts is putting the work in. He's communicating with his players, and he's getting better each week. I was shocked to see how good he was in the passing game. Everybody knows what he can do running the ball, and everybody knows what decisions he makes when he runs the ball. But his decision-making was really good this game. Phenomenal in passing. I mean, that's the best I've seen him so far over the year and a half that he's been in Philadelphia last year as the full-time starter. So I was completely impressed. I mean, putting in Quez Watkins in there as well, getting him a little bit more involved. Would still like to see Devontae Smith get a little bit more involved in that passing game. But once again, it's whatever works for that offense. And it was working against the Vikings. I don't know if it was just Kirk Cousins on prime time or if Jalen Hurts is really just showing up and showing out. But I was impressed, and I hope that continues throughout the rest of the weeks here for the whole season.
Yeah, well, hey, I think we saw a glimpse of things to come. Vegas is telling us the same things. His MVP odds went from 30-1 up to 8-1. Ocean Casino Resorts has him as the third most favored candidate to win MVP after Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. And you heard him in the post-game locker room. We left money on the table. Now, I don't know if he was talking about the Vikings game or his future contract, but he felt like, and I agree, they could have even done more in the second half. And that's the one, there's a couple criticisms here. One is the penalties. They need to clean up a little bit. But two, I think would be finishing, right? Because they kind of took their foot off the gas against the Lions in the second half in week one. And the offense, for as good as it was in week two, they really didn't do a whole heck of a lot in the second half there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they needed to. I think at that point, you look at your defense and the production that they're able. Now, I do agree with you in that situation because there's not every single day that you're going to get lucky where your defense holds you in the second half like that. We saw it in the Ravens and the Dolphins game. That whole entire first half, you're like, can I flip to another channel because the Ravens are going to win by a million? And then all of a sudden, the Dolphins come back. You can't rest on your laurels in that situation. And I think that's where they're going to have to step up against Washington. But Jalen Hurts is going to figure this thing out as he goes. And he always says rent is due every day. And you can see that constantly in his game plan, how he shows up and how he really is committed to getting better every single day. 26 of 31 for 333 yards passing and 1 touchdown. I mean, that's a stat line I don't know if I thought I would see in week 2 from Jalen Hurts, if I'm going to be honest with you. Once again, I think these expectations on him are a little bit crazy for him going into year 2. And considering that his passing game is one of the things people are worried about, and to see that stat line, I think is really exciting for Eagles fans all over. But I do agree with you. They're not going to get 2 interceptions from Darius Slay probably every single game. They're going to need to start to finish a little bit more. And in week 3, I think that's something they have to work on against the Commanders.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody expected Jalen Hurts to play that well. And even me, I'm probably the biggest fan on this network. That's the first game, I believe, in his career where he threw for over 300 yards and the Eagles actually won as the outcome. Previously, when he had to throw for 300, it was kind of a little bit too much to ask. But I'm just calling it like I said. I see Jeremiah in the chat room always going to keep me honest here. So, chill out on the Jalen Hurts. Well, I'm just calling it like I see it, guys. I mean, through the first 2 weeks of the NFL season, go find me a better player in the NFL that's improved as much as Jalen Hurts from last year to this year. I get it. It's 2 weeks. It's a small body of work. I'm just saying, I think he's the most improved player in the NFL, and Vegas clearly thinks he's an improved player as well, as his MVP odds continue to trend upwards. And again, I look at this matchup against the Commanders, pick and choose your poison, like Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert. We saw Quez Watkins make the big play. Our good friend Glenn Irby said, look for Zach Pascal to have a bigger role in this week's offensive game plan attack. But if I'm the Eagles, I know they have the number one rushing defense or rushing offense, but I think Washington is very vulnerable here, or could be vulnerable in the passing attack.
Absolutely. And I think if you're Jalen Hurts, this is just a great game for you to keep experimenting with that passing, see how accurate you can be for back-to-back weeks. Because when you go up against these tougher teams, when you have Green Bay and even New York throughout the season, I mean, the Giants are looking pretty decent right now. You're going to need to mix it up a little bit. You can't just do the ground and pound game. And I mean, you talk about A.J. Brown, and I think that's the biggest improvement, not only for the Eagles, of course, as we're seeing, but for Jalen Hurts. You look at a guy like Josh Allen, when they get Stephon Diggs, that makes Josh Allen an even better quarterback. And that is what we're seeing with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. I know it's only week 2, and I get it. I don't want to be like, Eagles are going to the Super Bowl, they're the best team ever. Nothing bad is going to happen throughout the season. But you're seeing these trends where really a quarterback needs to be good based on his receiving core. When you have a number one like A.J. Brown, it makes it a lot more easier, and it puts his confidence there on the field. And I think this week, yes, I think they're going to try to run the ball against the Commanders. I think that's their game plan to try and win it. But see how accurate Jalen Hurts can be. See how much they can attack. Get Devontae Smith involved a little bit more. See what he can really do. And I just think it's a good way to experiment with the Commanders, because I don't really think this game is going to be super close, and I think they're going to have the opportunity to do that.
Interesting. Okay, well, we shall see. I think the Eagles should definitely expect to win this game, and we'll get a prediction from you before we go. Last time I checked, this game was at 5.5. Eagles on the road, so they do think that Philadelphia is about a touchdown favorite, which I think is right about par for the course. However, the run game does have to be efficient once again. We talked about the 3-headed monster. It's almost like a 4-headed monster when you throw Hurts into the fold. Can they continue to be this effective and impactful using a 3-man rotation with the running backs?
Yeah, and I think once again it goes back to them being worried about the injuries with Miles Sanders. And I think that's the biggest thing. You want to keep your running back one healthy throughout the year. You know his history and what he's been throughout the Eagles organization so far in terms of being injured. And I think that's why they're doing it. And I think for the pure fact you're getting these other reps involved, you're seeing guys that really would be that next man up mentality if Sanders has to go out for 1 to 2 weeks with that hamstring injury that has been bothering him a season ago. And I just think it works. I mean, you're throwing defenses off guard. What do they plan for? When they're watching tape, do they just plan for Miles Sanders? How much tape can they really watch within the week when you're looking at A.J. Brown, Quez Watkins, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and then you also have to plan for 3 running backs. And, oh, by the way, Jalen Hurts can also run the ball. So you're planning for all these things. And I think right now for the Eagles, they're throwing defensive off guard with how they're able to use that 3 running back system.
Yeah, and our friend Glenn Irby made a good point last segment, and we haven't talked a lot about it on the show, is Miles Sanders is going to be up for contract. And he mentioned, he could command $6 to $8 million a year. But then I start doing the math, and we got to free up some other money for some other players, maybe Jalen Hurts. And I don't know, do you really want to pay big bucks to a running back who only plays 50% of the snaps? Like, at what point do we say, hey, Miles Sanders, show us that you're this bell cow feature back, take on, tote the rock? Or do we just kind of play it this way and make that decision in the offseason?
That's an interesting point, because does Howie Roseman have a conversation with Nick Sirianni and be like, listen, we might have to pay this guy. I need to see what he can do and if he's really worth being able to have on this team. Because you look at the 3 running back system, you look at Sanders not getting crazy amount of carries, but then at the end of the day, you take Sanders out of that equation and you kind of scratch your head a little bit and be like, I don't really know where to go to, because you don't have that running back number 1. Now, Gainwell and Scott, of course, very decent running backs, but they're not a running back number 1 by any means, in my opinion. So I think maybe that's a conversation Howie Roseman might have with Nick Sirianni as the season goes on. And when you're in those tougher games, when you're playing really good defenses, maybe you really just stick to Miles Sanders, and maybe that's the guy you go with. Now, I'll be interested to see what they do when they play teams like Green Bay, even when they play the New York Giants, like I mentioned before, throughout the season, the Arizona Cardinals as well, if they kind of shifted a little bit. But I think right now they're experimenting with 3. And as the season goes on, I mean, it's a matchup thing, in my opinion, too.
Philadelphia's finest, Kayla Santiago, here on the Football Playbook, of course, down there in Delmarva Sports. I want to pick your brain. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, Kayla, because as good as the Eagles are playing, we talk about on the show roster spots 47 to 53. You're always kind of looking to churn and improve the bottom of your roster. I saw a couple blips on my radar yesterday I want to throw out there to you, because two current free agents that I don't want to say I've pounded the table for, but I said, you know what? Maybe the Eagles should kick the tires on these guys. One, I will say Jason Pierre-Paul, who brings championship pedigree, can help in the pass rush attack, not looking for him to play more than 20, 25 snaps a game. Oh, well, he was visiting the Birds yesterday, but not the Eagles. He was down there visiting the Baltimore Ravens. I want to ask you about that. And then also Odell Beckham Jr. Brian Daboll has been flirting with wide receivers. We saw OBJ at the Rams ring ceremony there in week 1, and the Rams have kept his locker completely intact, saying, hey, whenever you're ready, Odell, we got a spot waiting here for you. And to me, it's like, if you can snatch Odell away from the Rams or away from the Giants and throw him onto this roster, I think it's a pretty good move. Now, you hear the flip side to that argument is, hey, not enough mouths to feed. We're already having trouble distributing the ball. But again, a guy coming off a ACL injury, is he really being asked to play a major role? You could almost say you're signing OBJ to be more of a decoy, if anything else. But two former Giants, by the way, JPP and Odell Beckham Jr. Do you see any room on this roster for either of those guys?
I will say I would not be surprised if Howie Roseman somehow pulls the plug, because you look back at a team that had this much hype and this much momentum, and you think about 2017, and you think about the moves that they made throughout the season that really ended up helping them. For example, Jay Ajayi at the running back position, being able to put him on that team to help the Eagles push even further than they needed to. Now, I will be on the same ways as I think OBJ wouldn't necessarily be a good fit for this team. And I say that because A.J. Brown's your number 1. Devontae Smith is your number 2. Where does Quez Watkins fit in? Where does Dallas Goedert fit in? And all of that. Now, I think that throughout the season, if he doesn't get picked up, if there's injuries, maybe then you look at signing him to be able to come in and fill that hole, because crazy things happen in the game of football. If A.J. Brown goes down at all throughout the season, you're going to need somebody to go back on. And yes, Devontae Smith, we've seen that connection with Jalen Hurts, but is he a true number 1? Is he going to be a guy that's going to be able to be A.J. Brown? I don't think so just yet. He's only in year 2. Now, Jason Pierre-Paul, that catches my interest a little bit more. I love the defensive side of ball. I love what they're able to do on defense. And I think he'd just be on Gannon. Once again, he's not going to play every single snap, but I think he would just bring that vet to the locker room. I think that he would be a great fill-in right there. And I think that he could really advance this defense even more than it already is. So if I had to pick one, it would be JPP for sure on the defensive side of things. OBJ, I just don't think right now with the weapons that the Eagles have, unless there's an injury, that he really fits in with this team, if I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah, and JPP, I think he can add some depth, to this pass rushing unit. And it's an intriguing fit. If the Ravens are sniffing around, maybe Howie Roseman is doing his due diligence. We shall see. I know Howie Roseman is a guy that never leaves a stone unturned, so we'll find out.
You guys were discussing Howie Roseman and the potential moves that he could make to make this team more formidable. You thought about JPP, and I'm right along with you. Right, I'm not sure if Odell would really fit with this offense, because you have so many mouths to feed. Where does Goddard fit in? Where does Quez fit in? And so on and so forth. But if you were to improve this team, if you were to put on your Howie Roseman hat, your Howie Vision goggles, where do you see Howie Roseman potentially making a splash move? Because he's done it before, that Super Bowl run. Jay Ajayi, where do you see Howie Roseman making a move potentially?
I think it has to be in the pass rush, because we saw it in week 1 how it wasn't good. And when you face power backs and what you will face going throughout the year, and your guys get tired, you're going to need that depth and you're going to need that rotation. We've already seen the defensive side of the ball have a lot of rotations throughout the season so far. So I think on the defensive side of things, that's what they're going to do. Now, in terms of getting a guy like OBJ, once again, I like OBJ. Listen, I love the passion that he plays with. I love how he always comes back out. Injury, torn ACL, whatever it might be, he's going to go out there and play. And I'm saying this as growing up near the Philadelphia area and not liking the Giants at all, but he is a baller, and I love watching him play. But once again, I just don't think that's somebody that you need on this team. I think that's a little bit of a force. Obviously, you want as many weapons as possible. And would I hate the move if Howie Roseman did it? No. I think they would figure it out. But I think if you're looking at needs and you're looking at something that will make this team better that's already lacking, it's definitely the pass rushing game.
Yeah, a couple more questions before we get you out of here. Once again, we appreciate your time. Kayla Santiago from JAKIB Sports. This Philadelphia Eagles team there so far looking like one of the teams to beat in the NFC. And if you look at the schedule leading up to the bye, this Eagles team can very well go into the bye being 6-0. It's very plausible because I personally think they're better than the Cowboys. I think they're a better team than the Cardinals. I think that Jags game is going to be tough, but I think we get out with that one as well. I think we handle things with the Commanders also this Sunday. But I'm curious to know, at what point in the season would you say this team is or should be considered to be maybe a Super Bowl contender? What's the game for you? What's that point in the season where you say, okay, I think this team can do it?
If you look at the schedule right now, I mean, you look at November 27th, that Eagles versus Packers game, I think can be a really huge determining factor because at that point, Aaron Rodgers is already seasoned. He's figured his team out. And before that, you play the Colts, the Commanders, the Texans, and the Steelers. I don't really think they're going to be tough contests. I just really don't. Maybe the Steelers might be a little bit, but the Texans, Commanders, and the Colts look awful this year so far, if I do have to say. So I think you look at that. You look at the Packers game. You shift to the following week against the Titans. I think that's an okay matchup for the Eagles. But then you also look at the Giants. And I had this conversation a few days ago because everybody's saying the last game of the year against the Giants might be the determining factor for the division, right? No, I think that game, December 11th, might be the determining factor for the division because you look at both of these teams' schedules and leading up to that Giants game, they're both fairly easy and they might have one or two losses in that time period, right? So you look at that Giants game, that might be a situation where the Eagles might only have a loss and that could drop them to 2, or the Giants might have 2 losses, that could drop them to 3 or keep them at 2 and then they're even. So you look at that Packers game, in my opinion, on November 27th, but I think that Giants game, I think if the Eagles can get past that, you're looking at a team that might only have 1 loss. And in that situation, you follow with the Bears, the Cowboys, the Saints, and the Giants once again. I think that's when you can start having those conversations. Absolutely.
So, final question. Eagles Commanders on Sunday, 1 p.m. What's your score prediction? How do you think it turns out?
Listen, I will say last week that I think I predicted the Vikings and the Eagles way too close, and I think a lot of people did and weren't expecting it to be the offensive command that they had. So I'm going to say the Eagles win by 2 touchdowns. 28-14 is my prediction against Washington. I know it's in Washington, but if the Eagles can have the game that they had Monday night, they're going to be in good shape.
Okay, I feel you. Oh, let me sneak this one in. Carson Wentz is a guy that likes to hang out in that pocket way too long. How many sacks do we have?
I would say 3 sacks on the day. I think that Carson is – I'm scared for him in this game is all I'm going to say. I think the defense is ready to light him up. They don't have the same running game that the Vikings even do, right? So you look at Kirk Cousins, not the best quarterback, but you have Dalvin Cook back there, and the Eagles stopped Dalvin Cook. I know that because he's my fantasy QB, and he was projected for 18 points, and he got me 7. So it wasn't a great day for me in fantasy, but you look at that right there and you say, well, they don't have as much of a running command as the Vikings did. And you're talking about Carson, who likes to hang in there. I think Carson's going to have a little bit of a better game plan, though. I think he'll release it a little bit quicker, but I definitely think 3 sacks, possibly 4. I think Fletcher Cox is going to be right there. And I know they're friendly, but this game is all about the divisional rival. And I think Cox is going to show up to play.
Hey. There you have it, you guys. That was Kayla Santiago from JAKIB Sports. Kayla, once again, thank you so much for being patient with us throughout the technical difficulties. You're always a champ every single Wednesday. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great talking Eagles with you. And, of course, go Birds.